Learning sports photography can be rough. I remember being very confused and very frustrated when I was first learning, and it made me tweak out a little bit.
What does this mean?
Don't let this be you. Watch this video instead. Hi, I'm Ava, and in today's video, I'm going to be teaching you about sports photography. I'm going to try and teach you this topic as if you were a kindergarten. It's too young, right? First grade? Basically, I just want to make this video as easy for you to understand as possible. This video is going to be broken up into multiple chapters, so if at any point you get bored, please don't skip the video, just skip the chapter. Okay, I think that's all I have to say, so let's get started. This is a camera body. A camera body is the base of your setup, but it can't be used by itself. You need a lens to complete the setup. It's kind of like me without you. When picking out which lens to use, you need to keep in mind two things: the focal length and the aperture, and maybe the price. In simple terms, the focal length is how zoomed in your lens will be. The higher the millimeter, the more zoomed in the picture will be, and the lower the millimeter, the wider the photo will be. A 50mm lens is closest to what our eyes see. A 35 and lower is considered a wide angle lens. If you get really low, like 8 to 10mm, that is considered a fisheye lens, and 70 to 80mm and above is considered a telephoto lens. Aperture is the second important thing that you need to pay attention to when picking out which lens to use. I'm going to talk about this more in the settings section because it technically counts as a setting, but there's some things you need to know about it as a lens option as well. If you don't know what aperture is, it controls how much light is in your photo and how blurry the background is. Once again, I'm going to talk about this later. Here are some terms to learn regarding aperture. Fixed versus variable aperture. A fixed aperture means the f-stop will not move unless you change it manually. A variable aperture means that it will move by itself when you zoom in. Typically, people desire a fixed aperture because it gives them more light and more of a blurry background. The next terms to learn are prime versus zoom lenses. A prime lens has a fixed focal length, so basically it can't zoom. A zoom lens can zoom. A prime lens always has a fixed aperture, and a zoom lens can have a fixed or a variable aperture. I will go more in depth about this in another video, but I'm not going to leave you hanging. I use a Sony a7 IV as my main camera body. I use an 85mm f1.4 and a 70-200 f2.8 as my main lenses. I have only shot on the Sony a7 II, a7 III, and a7 IV. I would love to give more affordable camera body recommendations sometime in the future, but like I said, I've only used these 3 cameras, so I can't speak from experience. In my opinion, one of the most important parts of sports photography is learning how to use the settings on your camera, and this means manual mode. In general, controlling your settings is just controlling how much light gets into your camera. Most of the time, you're going to want as much light as possible, but that's not how life works. If you want more light, you're going to have to sacrifice some things, aka your settings. Boo! This triangle is an example of how your settings work together. I'm not really the best at explaining this triangle because I didn't really understand it when I was first starting, but hopefully you do. In this chapter, I'm going to talk about the 3 main settings: shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. Shutter speed controls how sharp or how blurry your image will be. If you have a lower shutter speed, it's going to be blurry, and if you have a higher shutter speed, it's going to be sharp. It's essential to have a high shutter speed for freezing motion. Shutter speed is measured by a fraction-looking thing, but don't worry, you don't actually need to learn fractions to know how to use this. Get rid of the 1 and the slash, and look at the last number. And for the most part, you want that to be 800 or higher when you're shooting sports. I like it over 1,000 personally. Sometimes though, you will want to use a lower shutter speed for artsy reasons. I don't ever do it because it's too hard for me, so I can't help you with that. Sorry about it. Look up a YouTube tutorial. That sounded a little sassy. I'm sorry about that. Next is aperture. We've already talked about this a little bit, but let's talk about it some more. Aperture controls how much light gets into your camera sensor. This made no sense to me when I first started, so just know that having a low aperture gives you a blurry background and that professional look, and a higher aperture does not. It's still cute though, but for most of my sports photos, I like having a low aperture. Now for ISO. This is the last setting you want to adjust when you're taking pictures. ISO is a pretty boring setting, probably my least favorite setting. No offense or anything to ISO, but it's just The lower the ISO, the less grainier the photo will be. The higher the ISO, the grainier the photo will be. You usually want to have a lower ISO, but you can't always do that when your other settings are already set. So if you have a shutter speed that you want and your photo is still too dark, don't change your shutter speed. You want to have a sharp image. It's better to have a grainier image because you can edit that out later. The highest ISO I will usually shoot is 2500. I don't like going above that, but I have done it before, but I hate it. Keep in mind, everyone's camera is different. I know so many people that go way higher than 2500. That's just what I like for my camera, and it's my personal preference, but you can do whatever you want because it's your life and you're the only one in control of your life. Go you. I have some honorable mentions for this category. I also want to talk about white balance. This is I don't want to talk about it actually. Well, it's a new day and I'm feeling great, so let's get started. Composition is the arrangement/organization of visual elements within a frame of a photograph. The first thing I want to mention in this chapter is that sports photography isn't just about capturing a moment, it's about telling a story. Here are some ways to tell a story through your photography. Capture emotions. Focus on facial features, reactions, celebrations of the athletes, coaches, and even the spectators. Set the scene. A great way to do this is by taking a wide-angle photo of the arena, and this really shows the size and importance of the event going on in there. Also, taking pictures of the fans and the mascots also helps set the scene. Take tight/detail shots. These will help isolate your subject and put emphasis on a small piece of the story. A good composition draws attention to the most important part of the photo. The best way to have a clear and strong composition is by keeping it simple. Here's some more tips I have from this section. Take balanced photos. This basically just means take pictures of the subject in the center of the frame. I do this a lot, but it can kind of get boring, so make sure you switch it up every now and then. How do I switch it up, you may ask? Well, I got you. If you still like having the subject in the middle, maybe shoot from a different angle, like shoot from very low or shoot from super high up, maybe go in the bleachers. Just add some variety to make it cool and swagalicious. Shoot a frame within a frame. This means you find an object or a person or something that surrounds your subject and makes it look like it's a frame. Use leading lines. Leading lines basically just lead your eyes to the most important part of the photo. Use a low aperture. This will blur out the background, getting rid of distractions and ultimately isolating your subject for a great photo. Leave space for the athletes to move into. For basketball and volleyball, I usually shoot vertically because they jump a lot, and for most other sports, I shoot horizontally. You want to leave space so you're not accidentally cropping out any parts of the body and cutting off limbs. You don't want to do that. That's very bad. You want them head to toe. Shoot from the ground up. I like this because it makes the athletes look big and strong and powerful, and that's what they like. I hardly ever take pictures standing up. If you do, totally cool, totally fine. That's great as well, but I always shoot my pictures from on the ground, whether that's like laying on the ground or just sitting. Be aware of the background. You really don't want to have a busy background. You want to try and get rid of as many distractions as possible, which is why I recommend using a low aperture. Another thing you want to keep in mind is the stands. Try to avoid having empty stands in the background. It's just not a good vibe, you know? Action shots are awesome, but still make sure you're switching it up. Try getting some candid photos of teammates laughing with each other in between plays, or getting static shots of the athletes just standing there. A lot of athletes like pictures of just the back of their jersey, so definitely get those photos too. Two things you want to do before you actually get to the event and start shooting is research the sport. Knowing the game helps a lot with knowing where to stand, how to anticipate certain actions. The second thing you want to do is make a plan. For example, picking out which lenses you want to use, knowing where to stand. Just do some research. It'll help you out a lot. Pay attention during warm-ups. During warm-ups, you want to practice moving your camera with the ball, that type of thing. And also scout out the players. See who the best players on the team. See if they're right-handed or left-handed, that type of thing. It is better to overshoot versus to undershoot with sports. I use high-speed continuous shooting, so I can just press the button, it's and it takes a whole bunch of photos, which is really nice because I get sequences of action. Do not stop shooting until the reaction of the play is over. Don't look at your camera after a really amazing play to see if you got it. Keep shooting because sometimes the athlete's reaction is even better than the actual shot of the play. I said this word earlier, but anticipation is key. The ball moves pretty fast in basketball and volleyball, and sometimes I'm getting lost in everything. I will sometimes just keep my camera on one specific person or one specific area that I know that the ball is going to go to and just wait to capture it then. I don't usually do this, but sometimes I get bored, and when I was first starting off, it was really hard for me to keep up with everything. Refs are going to get in your way. It's just something that happens. It really sucks. It's really annoying, but you can try and recognize the patterns of where the refs end up running and try to work around that. Think! This job requires a lot of thinking. For example, if your team's about to win the game, think about where they're going to go next. Are they going to go to their goalie? Like in lacrosse, they all go and they hit their goalie on the head. Are they going to run to their bench and cheer? That's usually what happens. Just think ahead and try and position yourself in spots where the athletes are going to run to. Now let's talk about editing. The first thing I do is I cull my photos. Culling is a process of selecting and removing good photos and bad photos and all of that. It's just the sorting of your photos. I start by just scrolling through the photos and say I like this photo, I'll press the star so I can go back to it later. If I like it a lot and it's one of my favorite photos, I'll flag it or I'll give it 5 stars. And then I just keep doing this with all of my photos. Say I like this one, I'll press the favorite button, and then it will put it in another group so I can come back to it later, and it makes it easier to categorize. Sports photography is a lot of luck still, so although I've been doing it for a while, I got very unlucky during this series of shots, so I'll show you them. I'm not like super unlucky, it just would have been better if number 4 was out of the picture, but you know, you can't really control that, so I just didn't favorite any of these photos. Like, this is a very unfortunate shot. I think it could have been cool, but we'll never know. So this photo had potential, but once again got unlucky with this dude's hand in his face. From this game, this is my favorite series of action. I was on the right side at the right time, and he got a steal, and he was by himself. I just got really lucky with it. I wouldn't choose this photo to send off, or this photo. This photo's like getting closer, but it just doesn't look like he's that far off the ground. Absolutely love this one. He looks like he's super high up. You can see where the basket is. His face is there. The ball is there. Like, I don't know. I love this picture. It's probably one of my favorite pictures I've ever taken. These two are my favorites. I don't know which one I like more. Probably this one. Why? I'm not too sure. I think it's because it's like darker and it's more like isolated over here. I don't know. Don't really like this picture. Don't really like this picture. Like, this is just showing that like the actual act of doing something isn't always the coolest part. Like, the actual dunk wasn't like the best photo. It was him like floating up to the dunk. This sequence had more potential. I just don't feel like I was standing in the right spot. I also cut off his toes a little bit, so I should have been closer to the ground. I like this picture because I like his facial expression in it. For sequences of action, I have a hard time picking my like one favorite photo from the shots. For this one, I'd probably say it's here, just because of the emotion on his face. This one I like a lot, but his like mouth is getting cut off a little bit by his arm. Same thing here. This is not a good picture because you can't see his face. I like this photo. I think it could be better if this person was gone, but I really like that you can see that he's off the ground, the ball is in the air, you can see the net. I like that you can also see his face, and I like that you can see the bench's reaction to his shot. This is an example of like a static shot. He's not doing anything. He's like tucking in his jersey, I think. These are pictures that honestly are kind of the most popular with the athletes. This is another example that I'm talking about of them not facing you, but just having their jersey number in it. Taking good action shots is great, and it's awesome for your portfolio and everything, but sometimes if you're shooting like 4 people, they're not gonna necessarily want that photo or appreciate it as much as they should. This is another getting the back of the jersey photo. Here's a photo that would have went crazy if it had more people in the stands, but you can see how empty it is here. So it's not the best photo. Here's a good frame within a frame picture. It's not like great, but it just kind of like shows you the idea of what a frame within a frame would be. Because look, she is within the frame of them. So cool. When the athletes are running, you don't really want to get them like with their feet crossed over. You want to get them like kind of in stride. So out of these 3 photos, this one is the best, just because her legs are separated and her leg is straight. It's also nicer when they're dribbling to have the ball like in their hand versus like on the ground, because it just kind of looks awkward. This looks good because the ball's in her hand and then she goes to dribble, and it just kind of looks awkward. For my editing, I keep it pretty simple. I'll up the exposure, the contrast, the highlights, shadows. This is just like kind of like a base setup of like what I do every time. Sometimes I'll add some vibrance. I also like to add a little bit of clarity. For my favorite photos, sometimes I'll go in and make a mask of the background and do a little bit of noise reduction. Oops, I did that wrong. Invert. And sometimes I'll add clarity to it. Sometimes I'll make it brighter. Sometimes I'll make it darker. And then sometimes if I'm feeling like it, I'll add another mask like towards the face area and make it a little bit brighter so they stick out more. So here's the before and here's the after. Okay, I'm gonna edit this photo also. The first thing I do is I usually crop the photo, make sure that it's all straight and everything. Exposure up, contrast up, highlights up, shadows up, whites up, blacks down. Add some vibrance. Sometimes I will turn down the yellow. Her shoes are yellow, so I'm not going to do that here. But a lot of the times I'll turn down the yellow because the court can get super yellow, and I'll make it a little bit brighter, and I'll turn the saturation down for it. Add some clarity. And then once again, I'm going to go in and select the background. Add noise reduction for it. And for this one, I think I'm going to make it a little bit darker, just so she sticks out more. For this one, I'm not going to add like the little circle in front of her because I already feel like she sticks out enough for this. And yeah, that's how I would edit this photo. Like I said, I don't do much to my sports photos. I like to keep it pretty simple. That's all for the editing part, but if you have any more questions, let me know and I can try and make another video for you.